At 2:03 a.m., I was pulled out of the kind of deep, undisturbed sleep you don't usually get in a suburban neighborhood run by a psychopath with a clipboard. Red and blue lights stuttered across my bedroom wall. I heard pounding. Not a knock. Not even a bang. This was a full-blown, search warrant, no-knock, midnight raid type of knock. I grabbed a hoodie, stumbled downstairs, opened the front door, and found 2 cops and a very smug Karen standing under a flickering porch light like the witch queen of petty law. "Sir, we received a 911 call about a disturbance," the taller cop said. "From who?" I asked, voice still gravel. "That's not important," he said, but he glanced across the street anyway. Karen stood with a wine glass in one hand and a phone in the other. She waved like we were old friends meeting for brunch, not neighbors at the center of a driveway standoff. "My daughter is having her birthday," she called out. "We just needed some space." I looked past her. 3 cars, BMW, Tesla, and something with butterfly doors, were parked across my entire driveway. Blocked me in completely. The shorter officer added, "She said you were becoming aggressive." I was sleeping. He nodded like he just heard that kind of excuse at least 40 times this month. Karen clucked her tongue. "It's just one night. You weren't even using the driveway." I blinked at her. "It's my driveway. Which is part of the neighborhood's shared resources, technically," she said, sipping her wine like she was quoting scripture. "You signed the covenant, remember?" I didn't. It was buried in the 5th addendum to the Homeowners Association bylaws, a document that Karen had practically authored herself. She ran the HOA like a dictator who'd read The Art of War too many times and watched Desperate Housewives on repeat for power tips. "She told Dispatch you threatened her," the cop said. I sighed. "With what? Sleep deprivation?" The officers exchanged glances. One muttered something into his radio. The other said, "Just don't escalate. Try to be neighborly." Karen smiled like a queen who just annexed another peasant's land. I went back inside. Shut the door. Locked it twice, even though it never made me feel better. I stood in the dark, stewing. Rage didn't bubble up. It calcified. Cold. Measured. Because I knew this wasn't a one-off. Karen had been slowly bleeding the neighborhood dry of joy for years. She didn't just enforce the rules, she weaponized them. I once got fined $100 for putting up Halloween decorations on September 29th. "The bylaws state October 1st, not a day sooner," she'd said, clipboard clutched like a holy relic. She once threatened to ban my rescue dog from the HOA park for looking too much like a pit bull. He was a golden retriever mix. This was just the newest layer of HOA hell she'd concocted. Her daughter's 21st birthday was an exclusive event, complete with a velvet rope and valet, aka a college kid with a walkie-talkie and no sense of property lines. I pulled open the curtain and watched Karen pose for selfies with guests as though she were on the red carpet, not a suburban driveway. One guy actually stepped onto my lawn to get a better angle. I wrote his face into my memory like a hit list. My phone buzzed. A text from my neighbor, Phil. She parked on my lawn too. "I'm too tired for this, man." I texted back, "Get some rest. I'm taking notes." Karen's daughter, Brittany, yes with 2 yes, was practically HOA royalty. Entitled. Loud. Constantly filming herself. Her friends didn't park like guests. They parked like invaders. My driveway wasn't just a flat surface. It was a red carpet for the narcissistic elite of TikTok. And Karen. Karen had decided that anything not nailed down belonged to her for community use. By 3 a.m., the music was still blaring. I could hear Brittany's laugh echo down the block like a banshee made of vodka and sequins. I sat at the kitchen table and pulled out a notepad. Started writing. Every car make. Every license plate. Every timestamp. Not because I was mad. Because I was going to make this official. I didn't believe in shouting matches. Karen thrived on them. She fed on them. You raised your voice, she got louder. You brought logic, she brought rules you never heard of. But paper? Paper was her weakness. She knew bylaws. So did I. I just never weaponized them before. I printed a copy of my property lines. I highlighted the drive. I started drafting emails. Subject line: use of private property for unauthorized parking during HOA member event. I wasn't just going to fight her. I was going to file her into oblivion. Because Karen didn't just disrespect boundaries. She decorated over them. She thought rules only applied to the rest of us. That community spirit meant sacrificing convenience for her convenience. But now she'd made me part of the party. And I don't party quietly. When I stepped outside at 4 a.m., the last of the guests were still giggling and hiccuping under Karen's porch light. One of them walked across my lawn barefoot and peed behind my hydrangeas. He looked me dead in the eye, shrugged, and zipped up. Karen said it was fine, bro. I nodded. Didn't say a word. Because Karen had crossed the line that night. She'd called the cops on me for being asleep. She'd decided my driveway, my property, was her own personal event lot. She'd used the HOA as a weapon again. But this time? She was going to find out what happens when the weapon fires back. Karen didn't rise to power in our neighborhood like some elected official. No. She seized it. One clipboard, one passive-aggressive email at a time. It started small, notes about trash bins left out. Beyond sunset. Handwritten and slipped into mailboxes like she was delivering final warnings before a public execution. Then came the fines. Then the meetings. Then the rain. Her house was the HOA Vatican. Monthly meetings happened in her overdecorated living room, where wine glasses outnumbered actual votes. The bylaws weren't just guidelines to her, they were divine scripture, and she was both priest and executioner. You didn't live in our subdivision. You submitted to it. I once watched her fine a neighbor $200 because their Halloween skeleton leaned too, suggestively, against a fence. Another neighbor had to replant their flower beds 3 times after she decided the colors clashed with neighborhood aesthetics. But my personal favorite was when she made an elderly widow repaint her entire porch because the shade of white was too optimistic. That was her word. Optimistic. Karen didn't just enforce the rules, she invented them. Her favorite phrase? It's in the bylaws. Whether it was or not didn't matter. She said it with such confidence that people just folded. She dared you to fight her. Most didn't. Most were tired, working 2 jobs, or just trying to keep their lawns green enough to avoid her wrath. Then came her daughter, Brittany. 2 Her personality was a living filter. Entitled, surgically upbeat, and loud enough to vibrate concrete. The kind of girl who'd start filming a vlog in the middle of a house fire and call it content. She was raised on validation and HOA privilege. I once saw her try to demand a neighbor move their car for aesthetic reasons, because it was ruining her Instagram photo. That's who Karen threw the party for. Her little influencer in training. She called it a coming-of-age soiree. But really it was a suburban nightclub powered by sparkling wine, Bluetooth speakers, and the entitlement of youth raised by unchecked authority. And none of us could say a thing. Because Karen wasn't just the HOA president. She was also the treasurer, secretary, and unofficial noise complaint coordinator. Every time someone challenged her, they ended up with a citation for some invented infraction. Hanging lights without a permit. Unapproved mailbox design. Dog poop that might have come from their property. Phil from 2 doors down once tried to confront her after she fined him for hosting an unsanctioned gathering. It was his niece's graduation. 4 people. Cookies and lemonade. The next week, his fence was ruled unsafe and had to be replaced. $1,800 out of pocket. Funny how that happened, right after he made noise. She ruled like a dictator with a legally laminated iron fist. The HOA wasn't a neighborhood agreement. It was a suburban monarchy, and we were all just peasants trying not to get our gardens cited. The worst part? She was smart. Knew how to skirt just close enough to legality to avoid real consequences. Every fine was just under the threshold that would justify legal intervention. Every complaint was filed with documentation and a polite smile. And every victim eventually gave up, not because they lost, but because they got exhausted. I once asked a former HOA board member why he resigned. "She's like glitter in a carpet," he said. "You think you got rid of her. Then she shows up in your cereal." And she loved it. She loved the fear, the control. The way people apologized for things that weren't wrong. The way new residents received welcome packets that included strongly worded reminders about seasonal decor policies. She didn't run a neighborhood. She curated it. And then there was me. The guy who kept his head down. Who followed the rules. Who didn't put up Halloween lights too early anymore. Who trimmed his bushes exactly once every 10 days because Karen once told him they were flirting with unruliness. But that night, after the party, the 911 stunt, the driveway invasion, something shifted. Not just in me. In the whole neighborhood. Phil texted me again the next morning. She blocked my driveway too. I just parked at the grocery store overnight. Marie, who lived across the street, wrote, "I called to ask her not to use my lawn." She said, "Take it up with the HOA." I am the HOA. That wasn't an exaggeration. She really said that. And that's when I realized, we weren't dealing with a neighbor. We were dealing with a tyrant. A self-appointed suburban queen who thought private property was just a suggestion. Who called the police on a sleeping man to prove she could. Who believed she owned the rules because she enforced them. The cops didn't stop her. The bylaws enabled her. The neighborhood feared her. But I wasn't scared anymore. Because fear only works until people get tired of being quiet. And Karen had just woken up the wrong neighbor. I didn't scream. I didn't post passive-aggressive messages on Nextdoor. I didn't confront Karen at her fence like every other poor soul who thought civility would work. I opened my laptop. I opened the HOA charter. I opened my city's public nuisance code. And then I opened a new document and titled it Operation Driveway Justice. First, I angled both my cars in my driveway, just enough to suggest I was defending sovereign territory. Then I submitted a formal complaint to the HOA, citing line 4.7b of the parking clause. No member shall obstruct another member's private vehicle access during personal events or non-emergency activity. Karen's little soiree fell into non-emergency pretty easily. I even attached screenshots of her Instagram story, where Brittany panned across my blocked driveway with the caption, "We run this neighborhood." Second, I filed a complaint with the city. Not the police, they'd already proven useless. I went straight to parking enforcement. Turns out, driveways are still technically private property. Blocking them? Illegal. Especially when it obstructs resident access. The law was obscure. Karen counted on that. She didn't count on someone reading it. Then I got creative. I bought a cheap, beat-up 2001 Honda Civic on Craigslist. Paid cash. Registered it that afternoon. Parked it in front of Karen's house. Not across her driveway, just close enough to ruin her curb appeal. The car was a mess, paint peeling, one missing hubcap, bumper held on by zip ties. I left it there for 3 days. Legally. It was registered, it wasn't abandoned, and it wasn't violating any parking law. Karen called the police. They knocked on my door. I showed them the registration. The car stayed. Next, I printed yard signs. Bright red. No parking, active fire lane. Completely fake. But I laminated them, staked them into the grass near my driveway, and added a QR code that linked to the city fire code. The sign didn't say it was official. It didn't need to. It just needed to look like it was. And it worked. Nobody parked there again. Except Karen. Of course. She retaliated by passing out flyers around the neighborhood. Some residents are attempting to cause division with false signage and confrontational behavior. Let's remember, we are a community. The flyers were printed in cursive font, framed with stock clip art of oak leaves, and signed, "Your HOA President Karen T. Winsley." I responded by printing my own flyer. Some self-appointed leaders believe private property is optional. Let's remember, tyranny starts with trespassing. No signature. No accusation. Just a mirror. Then I sent an anonymous email to the HOA board, including timestamps of Karen's violations, unregistered guest vehicles, noise ordinance breaches, multiple parking infractions, and photographic evidence of trash bins left out past the pickup window. The subject line read, "Documentation for future review." Every day, I moved the Civic 6 inches forward or back. Karen lost her mind. She measured it. Documented it. Called the city. Again. 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 But the car was legal. Everything I did was legal. And she couldn't understand how it felt to be on the wrong end of rules she didn't control. That's when the emails started. Not from her, from neighbors. Quiet messages, like whispered alliances in a war they weren't ready to fight. "Thanks for standing up to her. Need help printing more signs? Can you send me that parking clause link?" It was working. Not just my plan, my resistance. My refusal to pretend Karen's power was untouchable. The neighborhood wasn't loyal to her. They were tired. Tired of walking on eggshells. Tired of being punished for having opinions. Tired of pretending Karen's control was keeping us unified. I mailed the final blow in a manila envelope. Not to Karen. To the county zoning board. Inside, a formal request for investigation into her property, citing suspected unlicensed events, unlawful guest capacity, and multiple code violations. It wasn't personal. It was procedure. Karen had turned bylaws into a weapon. Now so did I. She didn't respond right away. But she noticed. The signs. The emails. The neighbors no longer nodding so quickly at her morning walks. She felt it. The shift. Then she slipped. At the next HOA meeting, held, as always, in her living room, I showed up early. I brought a 3-ring binder labeled Community Violations Log. I set it on her ottoman. I said nothing. Karen stared at it like it was ticking. As people filtered in, she tried to act normal. Smile. Greet. Pour her wine. But nobody laughed at her jokes. Nobody admired her seasonal wreath. And when she tried to start the meeting with her usual smug tone, she stuttered. "Before we begin," I said calmly, "I'd like to request the board review this documentation. It's a compilation of recent neighborhood issues, some involving parking abuse, trespassing, and unapproved parties." Karen's nostrils flared. "I don't think this is the appropriate. It's part of the charter. Community members may submit formal documentation for review." That shut her up. And that night, for the first time, the meeting ended without a single person thanking Karen for her leadership. Because they saw it now. The crown was paper. And I was setting it on fire, one bylaw at a time. Karen didn't go quiet. She regrouped. That's how she operates, like a roach that thinks the fumigation was a compliment. 2 days after the HOA meeting, she sent out a newsletter titled, "Clarifying the Neighborhood Vision," as if she were running for office. It included a new proposal, temporary use of neighboring driveways for special events. Buried in paragraph 4, under the usual Karen essay about camaraderie and shared suburban values, was the clause she'd clearly written for me. According to her, residents must accommodate temporary guest overflow, as a courtesy to the community. It was not legally binding, of course. Just a guideline. But Karen knew most people wouldn't check. They'd see her signature, the HOA letterhead, and assume it was law. She tried to pass the proposal at an emergency HOA meeting the following weekend. That was her first mistake. The second was inviting me. I walked in with a folder, 3 copies of county parking ordinances, and my Bluetooth speaker linked to my cousin, Josh, real estate attorney, former HOA litigation specialist, and my new favorite weapon. When Karen began her slideshow, yes, she made a slideshow, I waited until she clicked to the slide titled, "Event Parking Flexibility." "Point of order," I said. Can the board clarify whether this change complies with Zoning Code 9.17a regarding private property use? Karen smiled like a crocodile at a duckling. We've reviewed it. It's not a violation. Josh's voice crackled through the speaker. Actually, it is. You can't override property rights via HOA guidelines. That's called an illegal easement. Karen froze. Someone snorted. Karen scanned the room, trying to find backup. There was none. I watched her realize the power had shifted. We'll need a vote to proceed, I added. With full review and majority approval, per Clause 6.3.2 of the Charter. She tried to object, but the board, all three of them newly emboldened by not being alone in the room, nodded. A vote was taken. The proposal died on arrival. Her face didn't just fall. It cracked. The perfect mask of neighborhood royalty slipped just enough for everyone to see what was underneath: desperation. That night, she retaliated. Subtle at first. Someone put a note on my door. Let's not ruin what we've built. No name. No signature. Just the kind of vague, threat-adjacent cowardice Karen specialized in. The next day, I found dog poop in my mailbox. Not random. A message. Fine. I escalated. Another email. This one addressed to the City Council and the Department of Public Works. Attached was drone footage, courtesy of my neighbor's kid, showing party guests trespassing, blocking sidewalks, and leaving trash in gutters. I labeled it, repeated community impact events from single residents, violation submission. Then I called a tow truck. Karen's daughter threw another party that weekend. Smaller. More exclusive. But the same behavior. 3 luxury cars parked across my driveway again. No knocks this time. No police. Just arrogance. At 10:41 p.m., I dialed a local towing company and told them I had vehicles obstructing private property with documented prior incidents. They arrived within 20 minutes. Hooked all 3 without a word. Hauled them off before Karen even noticed. At 11:07, she banged on my door. You had those cars towed? They were trespassing. They're guests. They weren't invited. Her face turned a red I hadn't seen before. Her voice dropped an octave. You're making enemies. I smiled. I'm making boundaries. She stormed off. But something about her steps told me this wasn't over. She wasn't used to losing. She didn't know what to do with herself now that people weren't flinching at her threats. She filed a harassment report the next day. Claimed I was stalking her with legal documents. The officer showed up reluctantly. He looked embarrassed to even be there. I handed him a folder containing copies of every HOA bylaw I'd cited, time-stamped correspondence, and a printout of the exact local ordinance the tow company followed. He flipped through it like he was grading a term paper. You're fine, he said, handing it back. Honestly, more than fine. Karen wasn't expecting that. She thought I'd get scared. She didn't understand. When you've been quiet long enough, speaking up feels like a drug. Addictive. Liberating. And she had just given me every excuse to overdose. The final insult came from the neighbors. Not me. Karen caught wind of a secret group chat. Dozens of residents, old and new, all with one thing in common: they were done. Done with her drama. Done with the citations. Done with pretending the HOA existed to protect property values, when really it protected her power. One of them, Henry, forwarded me a screenshot. Chat name: Tired of Karen. Message: Let's call a vote. Clause 6.3.2. We can do it. We just need quorum. And they were right. They could. So when Karen tried to smile at me from across the street the next morning, I just nodded. Not with fear. Not with anger. With pity. Because the only thing worse than a tyrant losing power is realizing no one feared them to begin with.